Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and where I'm from, springtime means rain. Rain means beautiful flowers and nice green grass, which means picnic time. I have a perfect fabric line called Singing in the Rain and a free pattern called Picnic Time, which will go together beautifully, just in time for my springtime. The free pattern is from the Fat Quarter shop, and it's called Picnic Time Quilt. And each of these blocks are big 15-inch blocks. With such big blocks, the quilt will go together quite quickly. We will need a total of 12 of those big 15-inch blocks, and each block is made with fat quarters. So I have a variety of fat quarters, and these fat quarters are perfect for a spring day. Some rain boots, umbrellas. This beautiful lineup is from Riley Blake's Fabrics. And the background fabric is this beautiful soft white with these little flowers. We are going to need 12 fat quarters for those blocks, 3 5/8 of a yard of this background fabric, 7/8 of a yard for binding and some cornerstones. And for the binding, I'm going to use some fat quarters that has that beautiful diagonal print. Each block takes that one fat quarter plus some background fabric. So if you only want to make 4, you can. If you want to make it bigger than the 12, you can do that too. And that free pattern does include a pattern for a pillow. So if you have more than 12 fat quarters, you can make some matching pillows. The first thing I like to do is cut my background fabrics. So I'm going to follow the directions and cut all of those sizes. Out of the background fabric, we are going to need 48 pieces cut 3.5 inches by 6.5 inches, 60 at 3.5 inch squares, and 17 3.5 inches by 15.5 inches. And this is the sashing that goes between the blocks. Those first 3 measurements will make the center of the quilt. From there, we're going to cut 4.5 inch pieces that will make the border. A fat quarter from the yard is 20 inches by 18 inches. You can square up 2 edges and then cut your first strip at 4.5 inches and cut 4 4.5 inch blocks out. Do 2 more strips. They need to be cut at 3.5 inches by 6.5 inches and 3.5 inches by 9.5 inches. And that last strip, you need 2 3.5 inch squares. But depending on your size, you might be able to get the squares from one of the other areas. So I was able to cut out my 4 4.5 inch pieces with a little bit left over, and that's not quite enough for that H piece. I have the 2 next strips, F and G, and I do have a little bit left over for some 3.5 inch cuts. And I can save this for another project. If you're making 12 blocks, cut out all 12 of your fat quarters. As I cut out the fat quarters, I keep the fabrics in order. So I have all the same colors together. And because the Singing in the Rain fabric is directional, I have kept them all in the same direction. We're going to be able to start sewing these units together. Divide your A pile in half and attach A onto H. Your B pile is going to be divided. B will go on each side of your F, and a B is going to fit in the center of each side of the G's. So we have the A and H, B and F, and the B with the 2 G's. Put them on a board and bring them to the machine, and you can just sew all of these seams together and just keep them all back in the same pile. The seams are going in towards the H, in towards the F, and out from the B. These 3 rows are the beginning of our block. We have 12 with the light piece, 24 and 24. So we're going to be able to build the blocks just by shifting our rows down. The pattern has corners stitched on, so we can sew our units together first and put the corners on, or sew the blocks first. I do have some fabrics that are directional, so I'm going to sew all of the blocks together. And when all of the 12 blocks are together, I will then put on my corners. So I can sew all of these rows together. Press from the center, going out in each direction. With the 12 blocks done, we now can take the matching E-pieces and sew them onto the corners. A line will go from corner to corner, and that's a stitching line. We can place those on the corner and stitch right on that line. Once those corners have been stitched on, we're going to be able to trim off that seam allowance and press that back. It doesn't change the size of the square, it just fills in that spot. And our blocks are now going to equal 15.5 inches. Once all the corners have been put on, we're going to be able to put the center of the quilt together. We're going to need 6 squares at 3.5 inches, and they're going to go together with the sashing, which is 3.5 inches by 15.5 inches. The blocks will go together in rows, 3 blocks by 4 rows. And in between each block, we have that sashing with those 6 3.5 inch blocks in between. So you're going to be able to lay out your quilt in a pleasing arrangement and sew all of these together. Put the 3 blocks together with the sashing, and then a small row of sashing, another 3 block with that sashing, and another small row. Then we're going to be able to sew all those rows together. With those blocks sewn together with that big sashing, we have the center of the quilt that is going to measure 51.5 inches by 69.5 inches. Now we need to put on the final border. The fabric for the final border is cut at 4.5 inches. So we're going to cut the width of the fabric 4.5 inches, and we will need 8 strips of fabric. So we're going to have 2 strips per side. The 2 side strips are going to equal 59.5 inches, and then that top and bottom are going to equal 69.5 inches. So we sew the long sides on first, press those seams going out, and then sew the top and the bottom. With those borders on, the quilt does equal 59.5 inches by 77.5 inches. And that rainy day fabric is a perfect fabric line for this quilt. And it's also perfect to snuggle under, well, on a rainy day. I'll put a link in the description to the free pattern and the fabric. And thank you for following me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe and come on back. Let's see what we're sewing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.